Did you know that many of the ideas that Paul talks about in the New Testament were actually directly plagiarized from earlier philosophers? Let me just give you a few quick examples and then I'll show you where you can watch the rest. Now it's important to note that these philosophers wrote the things they wrote a minimum of 300 or 400 years before Paul wrote anything. Here's a perfect example. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, Paul says, "Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? But Plato says in the Republic in 375 BCE, but such as are true racers, arriving at the end, both receive the prizes and are crowned." Let me give you a few more. In Romans 8:5, Paul says, "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh." And in Galatians 6:8, Paul says, "For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption." But Plato said far earlier that to be carnally minded is death. I wonder if this is where Paul got that idea from. Or how about in Philippians 1:21, Paul says, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." But Plato says, "Now if death is like this, I say that to die is gain." Now, there are over 20 examples in this article that I'm showing you right here. But let's review one more here. It says in 2 Timothy 4:6, "I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand, to be with Christ, which is far better." But Plato says, "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die and you to live. Which is better, God only knows." Now, if you want to actually see all of my examples and have click-through links and resources and such that you can look at on the website, then come to bulletholesinthebible.com and look at Paul or Plato, the true origins of the New Testament doctrine, or the video version of this article is discussed in depth on my channel, Paul or Plato, True Origins of New Testament Doctrine, on the Bullet Holes in the Bible YouTube channel. Now, I'm convinced that after reading this article or watching the video, that you'll see that Paul copied a lot of his doctrines from earlier philosophers, Plato, Seneca, Aristotle, and many others. And that's pretty problematic. Why is that? Maybe because Paul himself said that he didn't get his doctrines from mankind. "But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached of me is not after man. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the traditions of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ." Then why are you quoting and copying the traditions and philosophies of men, Paul, and passing them off as if they're your own? Let me just leave you with one more obvious one. In 1 Corinthians 13:12, Paul says, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face." But Plato says, "I am very far from admitting that he who contemplates existences through a medium of thought sees them only through a glass darkly, any more than those who sees them in their working effects." Did I mention that Paul never met Jesus, and yet he was the first one to write about him 20 years after Jesus would have ascended?